I started my work in life on the hop farm at the age of 14, and we were living at Castlefroom, and the farm was the town farm. And we lived in a cottage that belonged to the farm. So it is obvious that I was going to work where my mother worked and help to keep the family alive.
So you actually had to do that work, didn't you? I wonder
Yes.
if you can give us that, sort of explain that to us.
It's a funny thing, but looking back now, it was a natural thing to take the job, whatever it was, and you didn't argue, disagree, it is convenient. And yeah, it's a good start in life.
But your income was really important at that time, wasn't it? Can you just tell us about that?
My father was crippled in the 1914-18 war. He was gassed, and he never really recovered. In fact, at the end of the war, he was in Ireland recuperating from the gas, and he didn't come out of the army until about 1920. And consequently, he was never a fit man. And, it was very difficult for him to make a living. To make it worse, in 1939-40, he collapsed one night coming back, being into Ledbury. He collapsed coming down the road home. He's paralysed, and he never walked again. And so it was obvious that I was going to have to work, and which I did, and I enjoyed it. My particular role really was, I was serving an apprenticeship on out to look after pedigree Hereford cattle, on calf feeding and getting in the sick and sweeping up, and generally speaking tidying, running and fetching for the head cowman, who happened to be Tom Bullock at that time, and doing any jobs that he required me to do, pulping the mangoes, mixing the feed, and yes, a big variation on, and driving cattle out in the daytime, fetching them back in at night, and that, yeah.
What was your role in the whole hop cycle?
In the
Hop cycle, from planting, growing?
in the first 3 or 4 years that I was working with the stock, I wasn't too much involved because a lot of the work is either in the autumn or in the spring, and that is also the time that coincided with looking after the animals. But I got more into the hop work when I changed a job. I'd had enough of the stock, but it involved weekend work, Saturday afternoons, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and I was doing 60 odd hours a week, and it is too much. And
so what age were you when you moved to the other farm?
yes, about 20, yes.
Okay, so and was that when you moved to Mill End?
That's when I went to the mill end, yes.
Okay, so could you say, I was 20 when I moved to Mill End, and tell us where it is, or was?
Yes. At 20, they're like all young fellas at that time, tractor driving was what everyone wanted to do, and there happened to be a job going at the mill end, which is a neighbouring farm but half a mile away to where I worked, and I thought, well, I'm going to apply for that, and I applied and I got the job, and that's why I left the town and went to the mill end.
Now, we were talking before in there that you worked your way up.
Yes.
You graduated to Busher eventually. Can you tell us about that? The jobs you did and what you had to do to move up to the next level?
Yes, well, this started, as I say, the first year that I started work in September. I was given the tally book to record what everybody had picked, and but 2 years there seemed to be a different busher every year, and this one particular year, the fellow who had been doing the job, he got a bit tiddly on the cider that kill blokes were entitled to, and he failed to come up the next morning. So the boss, who lost his patience, said he'd sacked him, and I was going to do the job. So they got some hops from out of the field, a couple of sackfuls, they tipped them into a crib, spare crib up at the farm, and it gave me the baskets, and now see how many you can get on a bush lid. So I tried and done about 2 or 3 bagfuls, and the boss seemed quite happy with what I got. I wasn't putting too many in the basket, and that was it. About 11 o'clock in the morning, we ventured down the upfield, and I made it my start, and a bit worrying at first, but yes, it went very well.
You had one occasion when you had a bit of trouble.
Yes, that was a season or two later. There were always travellers, and most of them you knew, and you could trust them, and they could trust you. And this one particular family, this particular day, thought I was pressing them in a bit too hard and threatened me with a knife if I come back again and done the same. So we couldn't put up with that. So I reported it to the boss. The boss rang the local policeman, and he came down on his bike and asked them to leave. And that ended that. It all went off very well in the finish. But they could be nasty.
Did you ever strikes? What happened? Did you have any?
Oh yes, well, every time we started hopping, there was a couple, 2 or 3 acres of really good hops down the one side of this field, and they always started them off in fuggles. They were nice hops, easy to pick, good going. Well, they'd have a day in those, or a couple of days, then they'd have to start picking the adjoining hops. And these are amazing, and entirely different setup altogether. You probably get no more than, you work just as hard and get probably half as many. So they thought they set the price right at the first to begin with, but they didn't like the price when you come to the bad going. So one section fell out with another section, because there were always a Welsh section of people who came from the valleys. There were the Dudleys who came from the Midlands. The locals, a few of those, never said a thing word. So, but then there's the travellers, and if they all got together and said we're on this strike, that was it. They wouldn't go in. So they asked for another 8p or a penny a bushel, and they made them wait for half a day. But you've got to get on and pick, so they relented, and they got their extra penny or whatever it might have been at the time, and all was back to normal. But, yes. The first day of hop again usually started in one side of the field, about 15 rows of nice fuggle hops that easy to pick, nice, easy to have a good day in, and everybody started off with a good day, but by the end of the second day, that particular patch was done, and they moved to the next one adjoining, which entirely, the fuggles are a lot easier to pick than the maidens, and the maidens tend to be more wiry and difficult and smaller ops, and people couldn't get on the same, so they realised they'd taken the bait the first day, but they weren't going to have any more of it, so they all gathered together, the Welsh, the Dudleys and the Travellers, and all got together and said, we're not going to pick. So it all stopped for a few hours while discussions were made between the management, and eventually an increase in wages was approved, and for the sake of 8 penny, they went back to work and carried on and went through the hop again, no problem after that.
Brilliant, that's great. Cheers, George, that's really good, thank you. Okay.
You're talking about, how the young ladies, I know your wife Lil is in here, but the young ladies coming down from Dudley and flirting in the hop yards. Could we hear a little bit about that?
Well, it is quite exciting. Young people are you do have an eye for one another, and it is great fun. You can making friends, and I also remember we didn't we picked until 6 o'clock at night virtually, and then you went home and had a bit of tea, and you back across the fields to the farm where they were all having a bit of fun, and well, it was very exciting times they were.
Well, that's very veiled. I'm intrigued. That's how we laugh, isn't it? That's how I was waiting for the next bit.
You're not giving too much away there.
What a gentleman.
The exciting times, they were the times after the day's work, and they all gathered together, and weekends in particular, the Salvation Army would come along. Maybe there was a coach load of visitors from the Midlands or wherever, and they would have a good old sing-song, a big fire going in an open shed, and everybody was singing their heart out. It was really lovely, and still to this day, I still like listening to hymn singing and what have you. On a Sunday night with songs of praise, that type of thing, it was just like that, being out in reality. Yes, lovely times.
Lovely. That's a great story.
It is, isn't it? I'm just interested. I've heard about pickers coming from Midlands and Wales, but you had someone from Ireland. And he stayed with you for a long time. He's in one of your photographs. Can you tell us about him, where he was from, when he arrived, what his name was?
Yes, my Irish friend. He's a very good friend, but he's very strange. Very much the Southern Ireland type, and he actually came from Dungarvan, which is down by Waterford, and he had strong views about the IRA, and he could get quite nasty about it. But he served at the Millendy. He was a stockman for 10 or 15 years, and he stayed there until he retired at 65 eventually, and became ill, and he went back home. But we were very good to him. We had a television at the time, I remember, and he loved watching the news and what have you, and anything the IRA, he was delighted to see that they'd been blowing somebody up at the time, you know. It's strange, really, a very funny fella, but he was all right. He went back home eventually, and he obviously died. We never heard no more about him.
But you were telling me before that there was a camp outside town, and then workers would arrive on trucks, and that's how he arrived with you. this. I'm just interested how he got here.
Yes.
Could you say where he's from, and do you know his name and what he did on the farm? And how
This was yes. The Irishman. He first of all, in the first instance, he came out daily with a load of workers who stayed in the old army camp in Ledbury, and a lorry. Arrangements were made by farmers to say who they wanted, how many they wanted, and where and when. And this lorry would bring him out in the morning and pick him up in the evening. And that's how he came. When that folded, he stayed on the farm at the mill end and stayed there until he retired and went back home. Shoddy was the waste from the woolen mills, and as well as recycled old army clothes, and a lot of the jackets still had buttons on them, but it was all shredded up together, and it was delivered to the farms in big trucks and tipped out, and we spread it on the fields during the winter. And it was worked in and cultivated, and it is quite an asset for the ground and the hops, helping to get them to grow.
Would it be really nice if you could say it was such a delightful story that when you were spreading it out, you'd sometimes find a gold button. Could we do that with the game when you were?
Yes. This shoddy. As well as being waste from the floors and whatever machinery and whatever, was also recycled army clothes, military clothes, and all the brass buttons were still scattered about it. And it's amazing you could quite easily pick one or two up whenever you were walking through the fields. And up to this day, when people go around with metal detectors trying to find things, you send them into a field where you've had hops and this shoddy, and they're getting burps everywhere, and they dig it up, and all you've got is a button, and it is quite unusual, but. That's the story of shoddy, and I don't see it around today. I don't know what they do with it today, but we don't see it anymore.
Down from Dudley being really quite poor, and yet they were happy. Can you tell us about that and your memory of that?
Yes. People from Dudley, when they came at the beginning of the season, it was mainly the women folk and the kids, and the males obviously working, and I always remember a lot of them worked in chain making in the foundries and that type of work, and they'd come down on a weekend, and they'd have quite enjoyable times, but they worked damned hard, and the women coming down, it gave them a chance to earn a bit of money to enjoy themselves when they went back home. And I never got too involved one way or another. We made many friends, but nothing serious. But my brother actually courted a girl from who would come down for about 2 years, and he used to go and visit them, and he'd say, they were, the conditions up there were quite hard, and but he gave it up eventually, and we saw no more of those. But yes, the women folk worked damned hard too when they came picking, and all the young children that turn an umbrella upside down and pick a few in, anything that helped to earn a few shillings in the day. It was all good fun.
Can you tell us about the guys who work there?
Yes, the people who worked in the kiln, doing the drying, the bagging, and everything that needed doing there, usually locals. And the dryer, for instance, he's a fellow who came back year after year after year. Their job was usually war work in construction or something to do with freelance people working, organising that sort of thing. And two or three of them would be regular workers on the farm. And occasionally you get one from a local village. They're always local, so people who knew the industry, because no matter how good what happened in the daytime, picking or whatever, the kill work had to be done precisely and on time. And yes.
Did you ever do it?
I helped with the bagging a couple of years, but that was in later years, because going back to the time when just after I left school, the bagging was all done by hand. The pressing was very hard work and very dangerous work, because if you let go of the handle, the pressure that would fling the press back up, and the handle would go back, and many an accident has happened because of that. But there's a dog on the wheel that you should never forget to put on, so that if it did slip back, it would stop it. But occasionally people forget to do these things, and one or two nasty accidents. But yes, it's hard work. But when I was doing it, it progressed to the stage where you got an old Austin 7 gearbox, and the local blacksmith fitted it up so that you put it in one to press, and then you put it into reverse to come back up. So the work had gone out of it then. But you ought to be careful that when the pocket started making a noise, creaking a bit, it was time to take your foot off and let it come back up. But it has been known that you push the bottom straight out. But no, it's...
What sort of accidents happened in the hop yard?
Hmm?
What accidents did you ever see?
The worst accident I actually saw in the hop kiln was it's in the machine when we'd got the hop machine and picking by machine. The hops were bagged at the machine, loaded onto a trailer, brought down to the kilns, and loaded onto a green stage, as it's called, a platform. And then at night, or whenever you wanted the kiln became empty, you loaded it up again. Well, one fellow worked in the kiln, lifting them up so they dry easy and keeping them level. And another one helped him by tipping the bags, while two more outside probably lifting the bags into a doorway into the kiln. Well, when the kiln was full, the first thing you'd done when it filled up and closed the doors, it should be, sulfur was used in those days, burning sulfur in trays underneath the green hops, and supposedly to kill the bugs off and keep the colour in the hops. But that's a terrible job of the sulfur burning. It blinded the gas from it is terrible. And they always you had in a big kiln you had 2 or 3 trays that you measured the sticks of sulfur, so much in each tray, and then you lit it so that it smoked up and went up through the hops. But to light it, we had methylated spirits in a gallon can, and the idea was to tip a little bit into each can, into each tray. But this one particular night, the fellow who was doing that, he trying to get in early to do it and get out, he poured it into the first tray, but didn't tilt it back, and it was still pouring out slightly into the next tray. Well, having done that, he should have got out of the way. You usually get out of the way and somebody throw a match into the first tray, and then he'll go through the lot. This particular night, there's two of them. There should only have been one, and the fella chucked the match in before he'd finished pouring it out, and the flame fled straight back up to the can, blew the can open, and it him in the stomach, burned all his stomach. Yeah, terrible mess he was. That was the worst accident I'd seen. And there were others at different times when somebody got tangled up in the belts because guards weren't compulsory in those days. And yes, generally speaking, it all went off well, but this was a bad accident. Fortunately, the fellow survived. He marked for life. One accident I remember very well, it was a very unfortunate one, but one that could happen any time. We used to, after loading the kilns, we light sulphur underneath to purify the hops a bit and keep the colour. And to light the sulphur, methylated spirits is used from one tray to another in 3 different trays. And before the fellow had finished putting into the last tray, someone threw a match into the first tray and automatically set fire to every one of them, load back to the can, which exploded, flattened clean out, and hit the fellow in the stomach. And he was quite a mess, but he survived.
Can you tell us about that?
About the what?
You got the first, I think it was a Hopkins machine.
Yes, yes.
But it was purchased, but there was no electricity.
That's true.
So can you tell us that again?
Well,
and what sort of machine it was as well?
The first machine that we had at the mill end was McConnell Hines, and it was, the building was built for to fit the machine, or the machine was made to fit the building. And McConnell Hines were the little company as opposed to the Bruff company, and that was the beauty of the McConnell Hines. Miss McConnell, or Mr. Hines, he made sections. It came in 3 sections, and each one of these was transported on the back of a trailer on the land, behind the Land Rover. So simple and easy, but it was convenient for the smaller op grower. And these were brought in a section at a time and fitted, and it's so simple. A lot more, probably not as good a machine as the Bruff, but very, very good anyway.
Describe how there was no electricity. So how did you go about working it?
Well, electricity was a problem, obviously, but a big motor was.
Sorry, George, can I just stop you there? Can you just say we had no electricity at the farm?
Yes, I
Needs to mention the Heinz machine as well. I think in this bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And could you also mention, because it's a different clip, can you also mention the Heinz machine again?
Yes. I've got to think a bit about it. It's going back a long time.
You're doing well there, Jules. You know.
You could just say...
You're all right. Yeah.
Mr. Arnon at the mill end decided he was going to get rid of all the problems of hundreds of operators. He's going to get out of the machine. At this particular time, McConnell Hines of Malvern were making him a small machine, which is suitable for the small farmer. And this was made in a section at a time in their workshop in Malvern, which I think was very small, and brought out to the farm and fitted into the shed, and gradually it was 3 or 4 sections which was virtually complete, and in no time at all it was up and, well, it would have been up and going, but the one thing we hadn't got at that time was the electricity. Now, some big firm who did make some sort of machinery up in Birmingham somewhere had got this big motor, which a generator, and they brought that down, and that was the source of the power for about 4 years, and it went all day once you got it started. It took virtually 2 people to start it, but it worked, and eventually it was replaced by the MEB when we had the power nationwide.
That's great.
That's
Yeah.
really good.
Can we do another version that's a bit more for the video as well?
Sure.
You're being very smart.
Am I?
Yeah.
Okay. Am I? All right. They're bad. All right.
I think it might be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right then. Yeah.
So, did you have to learn how to use this machine when it first arrived? Can you tell us about that? It must have been such a change.
Yes, the machine itself was self-explanatory if you know what you expect of it, and each section was adjustable or changeable, and it was just a matter of getting one bit right and then the next and then the next, and once that was set, minor changes are all that was needed, and different varieties of ops needed different ways of doing things slightly, but it's all very simple. In fact, I did qualify a few years later at a course, instruction course in the use and management of hop machines. So, yes, it is good.
You retired a couple of years ago. You described hop picking as the happiest days of your life, but you didn't actually retire, you'd gone back. Could you just tell us about that, what working with hops meant to you, how long you worked with them, and actually when you retired and actually you didn't retire, you've gone back to it, haven't you?
Yes, but my connection with hops go back virtually until the day, the first year that I left school and went to work on the land. And although I wasn't too much involved for the first 3 years because I was committed to stockmanship, I did eventually change my job and went out onto the land full time. Well, that started there in the hop growing season. There was a lot of work got done. It was done piecework, so it was such hard work that you had to work damned hard to make a living. But if you mastered the job, you could make extra, and that was a challenge to me. A challenge is always, I like a challenge, and so that started in the beginning. Let's just say from January. Nothing much happened. Maintenance with the war work usually happened then. And then by February, it was time to do what they called ploughing down, and that was ploughing soil away from the roots so that they could be cleaned and the pegs found for putting the string on next year, and then you move on from there. That was hard work, stuck in the dirt and cutting the bines off on ground level. But that was a piecework job, and if you worked hard, you could make some money at it. You made a £1 extra a week was a £1 extra in those days. After that, in February, there come the stringing, op stringing. You put in the strings up and on top and the bottom, and that was piecework again. And you can make a lot of money. And I mastered that art so much that I eventually became West of England Herefordshire stringing competition winner 3 times, and that was a challenge. I've got a lovely cup that I won it. I never lost it. After stringing, there comes the tie-in. That's a terrible job, really. But training the ops up, you could still at piecework. That is a lady's job, but they done it piecework because they could earn. The workers would always earn a little bit more. After stringing, the bracing, the ladies done the bracing. They did that piecework. The tying, as I say. Later in the year, there was leafing, which really means getting rid of all the excess foliage from that height down to the floor. After that, things went pretty quiet then. You walk the fields then, put in hops that didn't take to the string. You had to try and put them up, so they did go on up. And likewise up until Hopkins, which is everybody worked on the machines then. And after Hopkins in October, November, the old bines were cut off. Again, that would be piecework. And they were cut off and burnt, and whichever way. And yes, it's a challenge throughout the year, and it is a real pleasure. It's a damned hard work, but it's a pleasure to see it done. Sorry?
You retired in 2013 when you were,
Yes.
what, 80, 70 something? But you didn't retire for very long, did you, when it comes to hop season?
No,
Tell us
no,
that.
no, it's quite right, yes. Well, that's...
Well, you could just say, I retired in when I was...
Yes. Ops have always been my life one way and another, and first of all at the town farm, and then at the mill end, and then when I was 65 and due to retire for old age, that wasn't good enough for me. I carried on, and I still worked full time until I was to 2013, 83, yeah, 83 or 84. And after that, I gave up the full-time work on the ops and went part-time. And I always did, ever since, I still do a month or 5 weeks on the picking season in September. And it's still a pleasure to do that, and this time it's hard work because there's so many things in agriculture changing that it's difficult to keep pace with it all, and the lack of experience, knowing you're doing something that's not right, and it can be very trying now, but. Yes, I've been invited back again next year. Whether I shall make it or not, I don't know, but it'll be my pleasure if I do, I can assure you.
George, I'm going to start with you first. I'm going to start with you, Lil. Tell me about the cup. Tell me about the cup.
The cup, it was a stringing cup held in 1958 at Payne's of Southfield Farm, Cannon Froome. And I was lucky enough to win it, and I was lucky enough to win it the following year and the following year again. And after that, it didn't. There's no more competitions. They couldn't get the better of me, I suppose. So I was very fortunate, and I'm quite excited about that. I was.
Lil, you did something at that competition too.
Yeah, I did the string, the bracing behind George, and I won the bracing. Yeah.
Give us some sort of context, because you have to be very quick. So you won it because you were quick. So
Yes.
tell us what you were doing and what bracing is.
Well, bracing is bringing the two strings together, and you have to be quick. The quicker you are, the better. And so I won the stringing competition. Yeah.
Have you got the medal there, Lil?
No, I didn't have a medal. George had the cup. I didn't get it. I think we had
She had
money.
a cash prize.
Cash prize, yeah.
Well, perhaps we could say that.
Yeah.
I didn't get a medal.
And I didn't get a medal, but
looking
no,
at me.
no, I didn't get a medal, but I had a cash prize.
This is my selection of medals, which I'm very proud of. This is for 40 years service, which I thought was quite good. But then, 10 years later, I was up again for 50 years service. And I was very pleased about that. But I never gave up hope, and I made it to the 60-year service. And believe it or not, but that was not the end. I went another 5 years, and I got a silver bar for 65 years. And I think that's enough on the medal side, yes. I suppose I should be very pleased with that. Thank you.
The fish lady, because we've heard a few stories about her. So
Yeah.
didn't she just wash it in a stream or something?
Yeah, the lady used to bring the fish up to the mill end, up to the hop pickers, and there were rumours around that she used to wash it in the brook before she took it up there to be sold. What did he do before he got sacked? He wouldn't do something, and that's why they had the house.
Yes, he did. In the days of are you on film now?
Yes, Lil.
Look over here.
You've got to start this in the right place.
In 1955 this was.
Yes.
Right.
We were still in the days when local farmers were mainly held by the gentry and country estates. And the Cannon estate was a big shooting estate. And every time they had a big shoot, Colonel Upton from Cannon Court called on the farmers to each one send a beater for the day to move the pheasants out for the gentry to shoot. And this gentleman who usually got the job, he'd fallen off his bike the previous evening, coming back from the pub, and he'd broken his ankle. But he still hobbled to work, and the farmer knew, Mr. Harrington knew that he was at work, and asked me to go and tell him to go shooting at Cannon Court. Well, I went and found him across the fields, hedge trimming, and he could hardly hobble, never mind walk through bushes and beat them, shout and whatever. And he said he wouldn't go. Anyway, I had to report back to Mr. Harrington, who was very much annoyed, and flew off his handle, and poor old Dick Yap, I'm afraid, got the sack. But that was a downside to it, but the upside side of it was he was asked to vacate his cottage, and having been recently married, the occasion came that I could have a free cottage. So it wasn't all bad at the time. So that's where I started my life, and in a tight cottage working on the farm at the moor in Castlefroom.
Worked with in bracing and leafing and hoppicking on the machine with the, well, it's the only thing I could do with the children. And I remember one day in the hop yard, we were going up the hop road, and my daughter found a gypsy's gold earring, a sovereign earring, just one. And I've still got that. Yeah.
Did your kids used to pick with you as well?
Yes. Yeah. I used to be on the machine. I used to take them, you know, when they were small, I had them in a pram by the hop machine, and used to take them with me and go back, and yeah. Many's the time I've walked a mile with the pram with two in, gone down the hop yard, soaking wet, and I had to turn around and come back with the mud all over the wheels. About a mile. But that's all gone now. Yeah.
Yes, it's history, and it's the type of history that's disappearing fast, and there's too many changes, and there's going to be a downside of it all eventually, unfortunately. But looking back, the times that we've been through, they were hard times, but they were happy, enjoyable times, and you got satisfaction out of doing your work. Today you're just a number on the payroll, sadly. This is a stringing cup that I won in 1958, and I won it for 3 years running, and after that the competition closed. This medal is my 40 years service. The next one is the 50-year service, and the final one, the final medal is 60 years service, but for another 5 years later, I had a silver bar for 65.